Hi, I'm Andrew, the minister at Hare Street. Some of our small congregations struggle for musicians, and some have trouble getting preachers. And here at Hare Street, we've had people sick for weeks, or living overseas. We'd love to be able to stream some of our services in real time, so that folk could worship with us. We dream of sending a laptop and Wi-Fi home to someone who's sick so they can join in. The trouble with all this is the work. I can tell you from experience that the camera operator doesn't participate much, especially if they're tracking a wander around the church preacher like me. So we're looking at auto-tracking cameras like the Swivel.
Introducing Swivel. Swivel is the robotic platform for learning that helps everyone capture knowledge, share skills, and collaborate. Swivel enables you to capture instruction and interaction and share them.
In the meantime, we're experimenting with what it feels like to have a camera in the house. Listen in to a smartphone sitting in a lollybox for a tripod with a pebble for ballast. Welcome to the sermon. How much do you trust God? That, I think, is the nub of John chapter 14. On the certain absence of Jesus, Jesus is saying, I'm going, I'm leaving you. But in fact, by the time these words were written down, Jesus has been gone for 60 years. Okay? So really, it's also a story about the experience of Jesus' continuing absence. And it's 60 years of road testing the gospel without Jesus being present. In fact, there's probably no one left in the communities of John, if there were ever anybody in those communities anyway, who'd actually met Jesus in the flesh. Right? People were on their own. Jerusalem was destroyed. Those in John's communities who had been Jews, probably most of them, seemed to have been ostracised from their synagogue. Life was not good. And to make matters worse, the person, Jesus, who they thought was going to be the Messiah, the one who was going to rescue Israel, had been killed in the most humiliating fashion that you can imagine. He'd been crucified, which was the death reserved for traitors, and he'd been crucified by the very priests and the very people who had waited for him for centuries. So the church, the early church, should have sunk without trace. That should have been the end of it. But what we've got, showing up slowly in the historical record 15 or so years later, is this group of people who said, no, it didn't destroy him. He came back. In fact, this bloke, if you knew this bloke, it was like you had been in the very presence of God. Right? If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. That's what that's about. And now here's this mob 60 years later saying, and we still feel that presence with us today. That's what they called Spirit. I in you, and you in me. I will send you another helper, the advocate. You will know him. That's what that stuff is all about. The presence of God with them then and there. Pretty good stuff. Okay. So do you reckon then that in John's congregations everything was fine and dandy and everybody was full of the Spirit and happy and convinced daily that the presence of God was with them and it was the best congregation that you'd ever been in? No? Why not?
There'd be those that wouldn't believe.
There'd be those who wouldn't believe? Yeah, exactly. I reckon probably, I was going to say they probably had a kitchen like us, right? But I was thinking of a different way of looking at this. They probably had a sound system like ours, right? And in worship on Sunday morning, our sound system was being an utter dog. Right? Now think about it. What happens when the sound system is like that? Okay? Fred sits here, right in front of my camera. Fred sits here and says to Mary, you'd think flaming Leslie would get her act together, right? And Tom and Bill sit over here, and Bill says, I'm sick of this place. It's never right. Now, first of all, does it really matter? Secondly, what do you mean it's Leslie's fault? There's probably some truck out there waiting to get into Lawrence and Hanson's. Stop, as you notice. Don't sweat the small stuff. That is the life of every congregation. Every time you come into church, there's something wrong. There weren't enough peas on Friday night. Right? That's a problem. Michael didn't fold the serviettes right. Really? Does it matter? We had serviettes. Jacob read his book during church. How dare he? You recognise this stuff, don't you? I was going to say there's a particular... I'm going to say it's whinging. There's another word, the B word, which describes it very well. Right? It's not like Sunday night and Corey... he's bringing something out to the kitchen and someone hooks into him for no reason at all. We should stick up for that. That's not appropriate. This is stuff that doesn't matter. What a waste bringing all that fruit and vegetable in for morning tea, someone says. What are we doing when we do that? It's really important because that destroys the spirit of a congregation. When we get into whinging, we shut ourselves off to the Spirit of God. So if I'm up here, grumbling because the sound system's making a noise, right? Or because suddenly the hen started twice first time around, did you notice actually I said to Leslie, click it. It was my fault, not her fault. Okay, and I gave her the sound file that's got the dead bit at the beginning. But you know what ministers do? They get grumpy with Leslie. If I'm doing that, I'm not paying attention to you, I'm not listening to God, I shut myself off from God. That's the sort of problem that can happen in church. Now, what's this got to do with John 14? We seem to have got a long way away from it. Well, what I hear John 14 saying to me is something like, how much do you trust God? How much do you trust God, Andrew? I mean, who cares if the coffee thing overflows? Valerie might, because she was the last one here and she misses out on the good coffee. But really, in the big scheme of things, who cares if the organist plays verse number 4 in a 3-verse hymn? Does it matter? Do we not trust God? That God can't manage the world unless we get church perfect? There's something underlying that. You know, if I'm up here thinking, oh gee, Wes and Siobhan ought to get Leslie in tonight, it's like saying, God, I think getting worship perfect depends on me. Really? I know Siobhan could get Leslie into line all on her own. Let's unpack this a bit more. Let's go right back to the basis of who we are as people. I'm going to refer to the notes here because I want to get this right. I am end up in a box in the ground. I've got no choice about that. No one's ever avoided it. Okay? And I'm unlikely to have much choice about when or how that happens. Apart from looking to the left and the right when I cross South Road, or preferably using the lights up there, there's not much I can do to delay it. Even I should, probably. It doesn't matter if I'm rich or I'm poor. It doesn't matter if the coffee's cold or hot. It doesn't matter if I leave this church next week and never come back, or if I'm here for another 10 years and we've got 400 members. I'm going to die. It doesn't matter if we can't pay our mortgage and we lose our house, or if I die in my bed out there at Elizabeth at the age of 85 with a wonderful garden of fruit trees and all the rest of it. I'm still going to die. That's life. We might as well get used to that, because there's an awful lot of life in Australia is spent denying that fact, trying to pretend it's not there. My only hope in life is God. The only stuff that's worth doing, the only hope I've got is that what I'm doing actually does make sense, that it's actually doing something useful in God's world. Is that hope? And is the hope, the thought that maybe after death I'm not totally extinguished. There's something else that goes on. That's the big beer. The rest of it's really small beer. So, I will not leave you orphaned. I'm coming to you. In a little while the world will no longer see me, but you will see me. Because I live, you also will live. That's the hope. My only hope in life is that God loves me. And I've got no choice but to trust that. Okay? Raylan says, that's rubbish. Come on, Andrew, let's get out of there. We don't have to trust. I mean, where are we going to go, mate? I mean, there isn't anywhere, is there? Right? And what do you suppose happens if I say, I'm not going to trust God, I'm going to get me a good job, good luck with that, and lots of money, even less hope of that. You know what the good news is? God still loves me. God also still loves me. If I make a hash of serving up tea for John one night and drop a tray full of food all over Phil's lap, God still loves me. If I don't trust God, God will still love me anyway. The only difference in all of this is whether I'm aware, whether I have let myself be opened to the love of God. That's the first thing. And the other part of that difference is, how will I live in the world and what will I do to other people? God loves me anyway, unconditionally. That's called grace. Okay. So, what have I got here? If I do not trust God, I will close myself off from the presence and the love of God which is already here. Okay? I will walk daily in the presence of God just like I walk through the air and can feel it, except I won't be conscious of the presence of God. That, I think, is the truth of experience. I will shut myself off from the presence of God and I will not know God's joy. Oddly, God still tends to intrude and say, "Oi, wake up!" Right? But what a wretchedness I cut myself off from if I don't trust God. all that I have, all I have that counts in life is the presence of God who loves me. And what I get from this place, what I get from this church, is not the coffee and the food and all of that stuff. But that helps. Good coffee, right? Love the strawberries. But the key thing I get from this place is the friendship and the love of you people. That's what I get here, that I don't get anything else. And you know what? I have to trust God for that. Because if I try and manipulate Valerie Mooney into being my friend, she'll eat me with a You know, you can manipulate some people into being your friend, but they're not really your friend and they're glad when you're gone. Okay? And you can do cupboard love. Right? I've got a cat and a dog. They're both, we've got 3 cats. Anyway, we've got this cat and he's all over me in the morning when I come out, just like the dog is. As soon as I've fed the cat, he's off for the day. Right? The dog loves me anyway. There's a difference. The real love and fellowship can't be bought with food. It can't be bought by manipulation. I have to trust God for it. And this is plural. All through John chapter 14, you see it talks about you. Apart from where it says, have I been with you so long, Philip? You read that bit, that's singular. The rest of the time, it's not you equals Andrew and you equals Phil. It's you all. It's talking to us as a group. And really, what it's saying is, most of all, where we meet God is in the congregation. Right? And if I'm grumbling about Valerie back-chatting me in the sermon and she's grumbling because I'm not wearing a tie, we miss the presence of God, don't we? I love your back-chatting, by the way. More of you should follow Valerie's example. Seriously. So how does this work? You know, this trusting God and this not whinging thing. How does this all work? Well, there's a verse. Could you show up the first slide we've got in the sermon, Leslie? Thank you. We'll see how we go. This is the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him because he abides with you, and he will be in you. We know that promise. People long for that. They long for the touch of God, and a lot of the time it's absent. And I've just told you that a lot of the time it's absent because we're so busy whinging. Right? Now, just before that verse, there's another verse that, you know, traditionally we're a little bit inclined to miss. Could you put that one up? Slide 2. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to be with you forever. If you love me and keep my commandments. There's something conditional there. If we won't love God and keep the commandments, it's not that God cuts us off. It's that we begin to pull down the shades and cut ourselves off. This is not a once-off. It's there again. Slide 3. Those who love me will keep my word, and my Father will love them, and we will come to them and make our home with them. And whoever does not love me, whoever does not love me does not keep my words. There's a bit of a twist in that. That suggests if we're not keeping God's words, that's making a judgment on how much we love God. Okay? So, how do we love God? Christianity is not a religion of rules. In some places where you go, and certainly in some churches, unless, I know we don't put the spoons out on Friday night, you get your own, you know, but unless the soup spoons are on the outside of the dessert spoons, right? unless the coffee's got exactly the right temperature and flavour, and unless the organist gets it exactly right, we haven't kept the commands of God. That's rubbish. That's absolute rubbish. This is the commandment. Slide 4. I give you a new... This is back in chapter 13. I give you a new commandment that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also should love one another like that. And by this, everyone will know that you're my disciples if you have love one for another. There's just one command. If we love each other in the way that Jesus loved us, we're keeping the commandments, and everything else flows from that. Right? So, if we were setting the cutlery, for example, and Corey got all excited and put the cutlery out for John, John might say to him, actually, next time we do that, the way the traditionalists do it, and it helps old folk feel comfortable, Corey. That means everyone older than Corey. They feel more comfortable with the seat spoon on the outside. That's the way to do it. See? It's not making any big deal of it. That's loving, Corey. Whereas if I come up and say, "Who are you? Don't you know about seat spoons? I mean, what is it, grade 6? You see what I'm saying? Loving each other lets it flow. When John is kind to him and says, this is the way people put cutlery out, that builds a relationship. And Corey goes home with his mum, or goes home in that flash orange car, and he says, wow, I really like these people. John is such a nice bloke. And John says to Audrey, I like young Corey. You see, they're both opening themselves to the Spirit. So we know God when we keep the commandments, and that's when the place comes alive. So let's translate that into Australian, right? Don't whinge about what doesn't matter. You shut yourself off from God when you do that. Don't live to find fault. Look for the best in people. Love people. Build them up. Be kind. Be generous. And there's a big question here. The sharp people are thinking, this would be my son, and say, but. What's that got to do with trusting God? Here's the connection. Love costs. And it can cost big time. Now, if Wes sees me doing something unhelpful in worship, if I get into the habit of mining during worship, right? Wes has got to decide, am I going to come down and tell the minister he shouldn't peck his nose during church? Because you know what ministers are like, I might really jump on him. Right? So to do that in love, is risky. Okay. Let's put it the other way around, so I'm not putting words into Wes's mouth. Okay? Let's say I had a difficulty. I thought maybe Wes could do something better. Why would I not trust Wes? Why wouldn't I go and say, hey, mate, we're friends, but the reason is I'm afraid that he might react at me and hurt me too much for me to bear. That's what's going on. I'm scared of the consequences of saying, Audrey, we need to change this. Okay? But fundamentally, I think that's me saying, I don't trust God. Because what's the worst that Wes could do? I mean, if he was really offered the bananas, he could kill me. But really, if my only hope is in God, would even that matter? It's very easy to say this while Wes is sitting there smiling at me, mind you. Okay? But that's the fundamental base of it. Do I trust God enough to say, hey mate, we need to talk? So, too often in my life, I don't trust Wes, or Audrey, or Phil, or Raylene, or whoever it is. And that means I don't keep the commandment, love one another. Because if I really loved Wes, I would risk going and saying, hey mate, you're doing a great job, but this could be better. And if I don't risk loving Wes, and if I don't keep the commandment, then I don't open myself to the presence of God who is already there. That's fundamentally what's happening. And then, of course, there's something else going on here. What about if I have a real whinge at Phil for something? Let's say Phil forgot to turn a mobile phone off, and it went off during the Lord's Prayer. Oh, I've done something way worse than that. I can tell you. We had an international guest at the 2001 National Assembly. Way over the other side of PAC, we lost contact with the computers, and I said to my mate, his name's just gone out of my brain, I said, the thing's not working, I'm going to have to reboot it. I just have to put up with it. So there's Bishop, Reverend, Most Holy, so-and-so, intoning the Lord's Prayer, and suddenly in the middle of it, over the intercom comes, as Windows 98 starts up all over again. And the moderator said, I thought, Andrew Pryor. These things happen. But you see, if Phil reboots her computer in the middle of the church and I have a go at it, I mean, it doesn't matter, does it? What am I doing? I'm saying, I'm inviting Phil to leave. See? And for this mob up here in the Lundberg pew, right, I'm giving them the message, you don't want to come back here. This is just like any other place. We can get that at the school parents and friends club. Why would you get more at, maybe we can get Uncle Fred to bring Mum next time. And what I also do is drive away someone who can bring me consciously into the presence of God. See what I'm saying? So here's the question. If something upsets us or isn't right about church or cafe or market or whatever, does it really matter? And if we're simply whinging about what really doesn't matter, and let's face it, we all do it, self-included, why? Is it because we're overtired? We're hungry? You should see me when the sugar levels get low, right? We're too stressed. Maybe we're living in an impossible situation. Plenty of people here know about that. How can we deal with it? We're going to go and have a at Valerie because she dropped her walking stick during the prayers. We're going to say, Valerie, I'm finding life really, really tough. I don't know how I'm going to get through the next week. We're opening ourselves to the presence of God and the presence of someone who will love us. It's a risk. She might be having a bad day. She might be feeling really guilty about dropping a walking stick and she goes all defensive on us, There's always a risk. You have to trust God in this. And the camera died. But we have to risk. Or do we not trust God enough to risk? To risk sharing with Valerie? Because if we won't risk it, we lock ourselves out of the experience of God and out of the experience of the Spirit who has been promised and who has come already. How much do we trust God?